Sarah had always considered herself lucky. At 28, she had a stable relationship with Marcus, a software engineer whose quiet dependability had been her anchor for 3 years. Their modest apartment in the suburbs was filled with plans for the future, marriage talks, savings accounts, dreams of children. But somewhere along the way, the excitement had faded into routine, and routine had bred restlessness. That's when she met David at a corporate conference. He was everything Marcus wasn't: spontaneous, charming, dangerously magnetic. Their affair began with stolen glances and evolved into stolen afternoons. Sarah convinced herself it was just a phase, something she needed to get out of her system. She told herself she would end it soon, that Marcus would never know, that she could have both worlds without consequence. The illusion shattered on a Thursday evening. Sarah came home to find Marcus standing in their living room, his face pale and twisted with emotion she'd never seen before. David was there too, looking uncharacteristically nervous, his usual confidence replaced by something resembling guilt. "Tell her," Marcus said, his voice barely controlled. "Tell her what you did." David shifted uncomfortably. "Marcus, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Marcus's laugh was bitter. "I gave you access to my laptop for one presentation, and now $15,000 is missing from my account. The transfer went through yesterday to an offshore account. My bank flagged it this morning." Sarah's stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" Marcus pulled out his phone, showing her bank statements with trembling hands. "He used my computer. He had access to my passwords because I trusted him, because you vouched for him. And now the money I've been saving for our wedding, for our future, is gone." Sarah turned to David, searching his face for denial, for explanation, for anything that would make sense of this nightmare. But what she saw there made her blood run cold, not innocence, but calculation. "Sarah, you know me," David said smoothly, reaching for her hand. "This is crazy. Marcus is obviously going through something. Maybe he's making this up because he knows about us." "You told him?" Sarah whispered. "I didn't have to," Marcus said quietly. "I've known for 2 months. I saw the messages on your phone when you were in the shower. I've been trying to figure out how to talk to you about it, trying to decide if our relationship was worth saving." The room spun. Sarah felt like she was watching the scene from outside her body. 2 months. He'd known for 2 months and said nothing, suffering in silence while she continued her betrayal. "But this," Marcus continued, gesturing at the bank statements, "this isn't about us anymore. This is theft. This is fraud. And I'm going to the police." "Wait," David interjected, his voice taking on an edge. "You have no proof it was me. Your computer, your passwords, technically, you could have made that transfer yourself. And with Sarah as a witness to your erratic behavior lately." Sarah's mind raced. She knew David. She'd spent countless hours with him over the past 4 months. They'd talked about everything: his childhood, his struggles, his dreams. He'd been vulnerable with her in ways Marcus never was. Could he really be capable of this? She looked at Marcus, at the hurt in his eyes that went so much deeper than this accusation. She looked at David, at his confident stance, his expectant expression. He was waiting for her to choose, she realized. Waiting for her to pick a side. "Marcus," she heard herself say, "maybe you're confused. Maybe you made the transfer and forgot, or—" The look on Marcus's face stopped her mid-sentence. It wasn't anger. It was something worse, disappointment so profound it seemed to age him 10 years in an instant. "I see," he said softly. "That's how it is." He picked up his jacket from the couch, his movements slow and deliberate. "I'll be staying at my brother's place. I'll have the police contact you both for statements. Sarah, I suggest you think very carefully about what you're doing." The door closed behind him with a quiet click that sounded like the end of everything. The week that followed Marcus's departure felt like living in a fog. Sarah moved through her days mechanically: work, home, restless nights staring at the ceiling. David had assured her everything would blow over, that Marcus had no real evidence, that their relationship could finally come out of the shadows. He painted a picture of a future together, one where they didn't have to hide anymore. But doubt gnawed at her. She'd replayed that confrontation 1,000 times, remembering the genuine pain in Marcus's eyes, the way his hands had shaken when he showed her the bank statements. Marcus wasn't a liar. In 3 years together, he'd been many things, sometimes boring, often too practical, but never dishonest. On the 8th day, her world began to crumble. Marcus's lawyer sent her a formal letter requesting she vacate the apartment they'd shared. It was his name on the lease. She had no legal right to stay. The letter was professional, cold, and came with a deadline, 2 weeks. Then came the detective. Detective Linda Morrison arrived at Sarah's office on a Wednesday afternoon, her badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights as Sarah's co-workers whispered and stared. "We've been investigating Marcus Chen's fraud claim," Morrison said in the small conference room HR had provided. "I need to ask you some questions about David Reeves." Sarah's throat tightened. "What kind of questions? How long have you known him? How did you meet? Has he ever asked you for money or information about Marcus's finances?" The questions came rapid fire, and Sarah answered as honestly as she could, trying to ignore the growing sense of dread in her stomach. When she mentioned David's financial consultancy business, Morrison's eyebrows rose. What consultancy would that be? "Reeves Financial Solutions. He's helped several people at my company with investment advice." Morrison made a note, her expression neutral. "Ms. Porter, I need to tell you something. There is no registered business under that name in this state. We've been investigating David Reeves, and his real name is David Reston. He has prior arrests for fraud in 2 other states, though charges were dropped due to lack of evidence in both cases." The conference room seemed to tilt. "That's impossible. I've known him for months." She stopped, realizing how foolish she'd sound. "You've been intimate with him," Morrison finished gently. "Ms. Porter, you're not the first. His pattern is consistent. He targets people in relationships, particularly those with stable partners who have financial resources. He cultivates emotional affairs, gains access to homes and information, and then executes financial fraud. When the theft is discovered, the victims are often too embarrassed about the affair to pursue charges aggressively." Sarah felt sick. But he said Marcus was making it up. He said, "Let me guess. He said Marcus was jealous? That he was trying to frame him because of your relationship?" Morrison's look was almost sympathetic. "Mr. Reston is very good at manipulation. We've tracked the stolen money to an account linked to 3 of his known aliases. We have him, Ms. Porter. The question is whether you were complicit." Complicit. The word hit her like a slap. "I didn't know anything about this." "That may be true, but you did provide him with access to Marcus and his home. You vouched for his character during the initial confrontation, which prevented Marcus from involving police immediately. The prosecutor will want to know if you were a willing participant." Sarah's career, her reputation, her entire life flashed before her eyes. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I swear I didn't know." Morrison studied her for a long moment. "I believe you. But you need to cooperate fully with this investigation. And you need to cut all contact with David Reston immediately. Don't warn him. Don't confront him. Just stop all communication. Can you do that?" Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. After Morrison left, she sat alone in the conference room for an hour, watching her phone light up with messages from David. "Where are you? Miss you. Can't wait to see you tonight." Each message felt like a knife twisting deeper. She'd destroyed everything, her relationship, her credibility, her self-respect, for a lie. For a fantasy spun by a practiced con artist who'd seen her vulnerability and exploited it masterfully. She'd chosen his pretty words over Marcus's years of dedication, his exciting promises over proven loyalty. That evening, she tried calling Marcus. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. She tried again. Same result. She sent a text. "Please call me. I know the truth now. I'm so sorry. Please." The response came an hour later. "My lawyer will be in touch regarding the apartment. Please don't contact me again." The finality of it broke something in her. She called again, desperate. This time he answered. Marcus, please, I know about David. The police came. I didn't know, I swear I didn't know he was a criminal. Marcus's voice was empty. No, you just knew he was the person I trusted you with. The person you were sleeping with in our bed. Did you do it there, Sarah? In the apartment I paid for? I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. I was stupid and selfish, Anne. You chose him over me, Marcus interrupted. When I stood there with evidence of theft, with my entire savings gone, you looked at me, someone you'd known for 3 years, and you chose to believe him. That's what I can't forgive. Not the affair, Sarah. The fact that when it mattered, when I needed you to trust me, you sided with the person who was destroying our lives. I know. You're right. I was wrong about everything. But please, can we talk? Can I explain? There was a long silence. Then, so quietly she almost missed it, Friday. Come to the apartment at 7. We'll talk. The line went dead, but Sarah felt the first glimmer of hope she'd experienced in days. He was willing to talk. Maybe, somehow, she could make him understand. Maybe she could fix this. Friday evening arrived wrapped in an autumn chill that matched Sarah's anxiety. She'd spent 2 days rehearsing what she'd say to Marcus, how she'd explain the inexplicable. She'd blocked David's number after Morrison's warning, ignoring his increasingly frantic messages that evolved from concern to anger to threats. The apartment looked the same but felt different, like visiting a museum of her own past life. Marcus was sitting at the kitchen table, 2 cups of coffee already poured. His face was drawn, exhausted, and Sarah realized he probably hadn't been sleeping any better than she had. Thank you for seeing me, she began, but Marcus raised a hand. Let me talk first, he said. I've had time to think. Too much time, maybe. I've been angry, angrier than I've ever been in my life. But I've also been sad. Sad for what we had, sad for what we could have been. Sarah gripped her coffee cup, afraid to hope. The detective told me they have enough evidence to prosecute David Reston, apparently. They recovered most of the money from one of his accounts. I'll get it back, eventually, minus lawyer fees and penalties. He laughed bitterly. Funny how that works. You lose $15,000 to a thief, and the system charges you another $3,000 to get it back. Marcus, I loved you, Sarah. I thought we were building something real. And maybe that's on me. Maybe I was so focused on being stable and responsible that I forgot to be exciting. Maybe I pushed you away without realizing it. No, Sarah interjected, tears flowing freely now. This isn't your fault. You were perfect. You are perfect. I was the one who was broken. I was the one who was too stupid to see what I had. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. I've been seeing a therapist, Marcus continued. She asked me what I wanted. Did I want revenge? Did I want to move on? Did I want? He paused, looking directly at her for the first time. Did I want to try again? Sarah's heart hammered. What did you tell her? I told her I didn't know. But I've realized something this week. 3 years is a long time. We built a life together. We have shared friends, shared memories, shared dreams. And maybe people make mistakes. Maybe good people do terrible things when they're confused or lost or looking for something they can't even name. I was all of those things, Sarah whispered. But that's not an excuse. What I did to you was unforgivable. Maybe it is, Marcus agreed. But maybe forgiveness isn't about whether something is forgivable. Maybe it's about choosing to move forward despite the pain. Maybe it's about believing that people can change, can grow, can be better than their worst moments. He reached across the table, his hand stopping halfway. I'm willing to try, Sarah. I'm willing to give us another chance. But there are conditions.
Non négociables conditions.
Sarah grabbed his hand, squeezing it like a lifeline. Anything. Whatever you need. Couples counseling. Weekly sessions. We need to figure out what went wrong and how to fix it. Second, complete transparency. Phones, passwords, everything. We rebuild trust slowly, deliberately. Third, you testify against David if the prosecutor needs you to. No protecting him, no misplaced loyalty. Fourth. He paused, his voice cracking slightly. You help me understand. I need to know why, Sarah. I need to know what he gave you that I couldn't. Nothing, Sarah said immediately. He gave me nothing real. Just fantasy. Just the thrill of something forbidden. I was chasing excitement instead of appreciating substance. I was a child playing with fire. Marcus nodded slowly. Then we have a starting point. This won't be easy. There will be days when I resent you, when I throw this back in your face during arguments. There will be days when you feel suffocated by my need for reassurance. This will be hard. I know, Sarah said. I'll do the work. I promise I'll do the work. They talked until midnight, peeling back layers of hurt and misunderstanding, beginning the painful process of excavating their relationship's foundation to see if it was worth rebuilding. When Sarah finally left, Marcus had asked her to stay at a hotel for another week while they transitioned. She felt cautiously optimistic. Over the next 3 weeks, they attended counseling sessions where Sarah confronted truths about herself she'd been avoiding. Her fear of commitment, her addiction to validation, her tendency to self-sabotage when things got too comfortable. Marcus worked through his anger and hurt, learning to communicate his needs instead of suffering in silence. They started having coffee dates, then dinners. Marcus set boundaries, and Sarah respected them. She gave him all her passwords, sent him her location when she went out with friends, called when she said she would. It felt invasive at first, like being monitored, but she understood it was the price of betrayal. The trial date for David approached, and Sarah prepared her testimony with the prosecutor. David had hired a lawyer who sent her threatening letters suggesting she'd be implicated if she testified. But Morrison assured her she had immunity in exchange for cooperation, and Marcus held her hand through each stressful meeting. For weeks after their kitchen table conversation, Marcus asked Sarah to move back into the apartment. Not to the bedroom, he clarified. The guest room. But under the same roof. We need to relearn how to share space, how to be a team again. Sarah agreed eagerly. She bought new bedding for the guest room, determined to respect every boundary Marcus set. Their friends started seeing them together again, cautiously supportive, though Sarah could feel the judgment in their eyes. She'd become that woman, the one who cheated, the one who sided with a criminal over her faithful partner. She carried that shame like a stone in her chest. But slowly, painfully, they began to heal. Marcus laughed at her jokes again. She learned to anticipate his needs, to show up for him in ways she'd neglected before. They watched movies together, cooked meals as a team, took walks in the park where they'd had their first date. It wasn't perfect. Marcus sometimes woke from nightmares about the betrayal. Sarah sometimes caught him checking her phone when he thought she wasn't looking. But they were trying, and trying felt like enough. Then, 8 weeks after Marcus gave her a second chance, Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I'm back in town. Need to see you. It's urgent. Same coffee shop. Tomorrow at 2. Please. Sarah. I need to explain everything. She stared at the message for a long moment, her finger hovering over the delete button. She should delete it. She should block the number. She should tell Marcus immediately. Instead, she wrote back, I'll be there. Sarah told herself it was innocent. She'd meet David. She couldn't think of him as David Reston, despite knowing the truth, just to get closure. She'd tell him to leave her alone, that she was rebuilding her life, that he'd done enough damage. It would be her way of closing that chapter definitively, of proving to herself that she'd changed. She told Marcus she had a late meeting at work. The lie tasted bitter, familiar in the worst way, but she convinced herself this was different. This was necessary. This was the last time. The coffee shop was the same one where she and David had met for their first secret rendezvous 5 months earlier. Walking in felt like stepping into a memory, and Sarah hated how her heart still raced at the prospect of seeing him. She despised herself for that involuntary response, for the part of her that hadn't fully died despite everything. David was already there, sitting in their usual corner booth. He looked different, thinner, tired, his usual confident posture replaced by something hunched and desperate. When he saw her, relief flooded his face. "Sarah. Thank God. I wasn't sure you'd come." She slid into the booth, keeping her distance. "I shouldn't have. This is a mistake." 5 minutes, he pleaded. "Just give me 5 minutes to explain." "Explain what? That you're a con artist? That you used me to steal from Marcus? That everything between us was a lie?" Her voice was low, conscious of the other customers. "Not everything," David insisted. "What we had, that was real. I never meant for it to go this far." "You have prior arrests for fraud in 2 states, Sarah said flatly. "The detective showed me the files. This is what you do. You seduce women to get access to their partner's money." David had the decency to look ashamed. "I know how it looks. And yes, I've made mistakes. But you were different, Sarah. I fell for you. That wasn't part of the plan." "Stop it. Just stop. I came here to tell you to leave me alone. Marcus and I are working things out. I'm testifying against you at trial. There's nothing left between us." "That's what I came to warn you about," David said urgently, leaning forward. "The trial. My lawyer says if you testify, they're going to make you look complicit. They're going to argue that you were in on it from the beginning, that you helped me gain access to Marcus's accounts. The prosecutor said I have immunity. Only if your testimony helps them. But Sarah, think about it. You were the one who brought me into Marcus's life. You gave me access to his home, his computer, his private information. On paper, you're the perfect accomplice. If my lawyer can create reasonable doubt about your innocence, the prosecutor might withdraw your immunity to use you as leverage against me." Fear crept up Sarah's spine. "You're lying. You're trying to manipulate me again." "I'm trying to protect you," David insisted. "Look, I've already made arrangements. I have a deal with a lawyer in Singapore. If I leave the country before trial, I can avoid extradition. And I want you to come with me." Sarah stared at him, unable to believe what she was hearing. "Are you insane? We could start over. A clean slate. No Marcus, no trial, no past. Just you and me, the way it should have been from the beginning. You stole $15,000 from the man I love. You destroyed my relationship, my reputation, my entire life. And you think I'm going to run away with you?" "You loved me once," David said softly. "I saw it in your eyes. I felt it when we were together. That was real, Sarah. Whatever else was fake, that was real." And there it was, the hook, the temptation, the same magical thinking that had gotten her into this mess. Part of her wanted to believe him. Part of her remembered the excitement, the passion, the feeling of being seen in a way Marcus's steady love never quite achieved. But a larger part, the part that had watched Marcus's face crumble when she sided with his thief, the part that had spent 2 months rebuilding trust brick by painful brick, that part knew better. "No," she said firmly. "What we had was a lie built on lies. And I'm done lying." She stood to leave, but David grabbed her wrist. "Sarah, please. I need you. I love you. Let go of me. Just think about it. Meet me here tomorrow night at 8. I'll have tickets, cash, everything we need. We could be in Singapore by Monday, starting a new life together." I said let go. He released her wrist, and Sarah walked out without looking back. Her hands were shaking as she got into her car. She should drive straight home and tell Marcus everything. She should call Detective Morrison. She should do a dozen things that would prove she'd changed, that she'd learned, that she was choosing the right path. Instead, she sat in the parking lot for an hour, staring at her phone. David's words echoed in her mind. That was real, Sarah. Whatever else was fake, that was real. When she finally drove home, she found Marcus cooking dinner, humming along to music, looking happier than he had in months. He smiled when he saw her, that genuine smile that had first made her fall for him. "How was your meeting?" he asked, kissing her cheek. Fine, Sarah lied, the word catching in her throat. Just normal work stuff. They ate dinner together, discussing their days, planning a weekend trip to the mountains they'd been talking about. Marcus mentioned something his therapist had said about forgiveness being a journey, not a destination. Sarah nodded and smiled and felt the weight of her deception growing heavier with each moment. That night, lying in the guest room bed, Sarah stared at the ceiling and made a decision she knew was wrong even as she made it. She told herself she just wanted to see David one more time, to definitively end things, to prove to herself she could walk away. She told herself it wasn't really a betrayal because she wasn't going to Singapore with him, wasn't going to leave Marcus again. She told herself a lot of things. None of them were true. The next evening, she told Marcus she was meeting her friend Jennifer for drinks. Jennifer, who'd stopped talking to her after the affair came out. She dressed carefully, caught herself applying lipstick, and felt disgusted with her reflection. At 7:55 p.m., she was parked outside the coffee shop again, watching David wait for her inside. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Have fun with Jennifer. Love you. Sarah closed her eyes, breathing hard. She could still drive away. She could still choose correctly. She could still be the person she'd promised Marcus she'd become. At 8:03 p.m., she walked into the coffee shop. At 8:15 p.m., Marcus stood in their apartment's doorway, holding his phone, staring at the location data that showed Sarah wasn't anywhere near Jennifer's neighborhood bar. Marcus sat in his car outside the coffee shop, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had gone white. He'd driven there on instinct, following the little on his phone's location app, the very app Sarah had insisted he install during their reconciliation, promising transparency, promising change. Through the window, he could see her. She was sitting across from David, and even from a distance, even in the dim evening light, he could read her body language. She wasn't telling him off. She wasn't setting boundaries. She was leaning in, engaged, listening with the same rapt attention she used to give Marcus when they'd first met. He'd suspected something Tuesday night when she mentioned the late work meeting. Sarah always complained about meetings, gave him detailed recaps of who said what and how boring it was. But Tuesday, she'd been vague, distracted, and she'd gone straight to shower when she got home, like she was washing something away. So he'd checked her phone while she slept. He'd found the text from the unknown number. He'd felt his world tilt on its axis all over again, felt the same nauseating betrayal he'd experienced 8 weeks earlier when he'd first confronted David in their living room. But this time was worse. This time, he'd given her a second chance. He'd gone to therapy, worked through his anger, learned to trust again. He'd opened his heart after she'd shattered it, offering her something precious and fragile and hard-won. And she'd crushed it anyway. Marcus watched as David reached across the table, taking Sarah's hand. He watched as Sarah hesitated, then didn't pull away. He watched the scene play out like a terrible movie, knowing how it ended because he'd seen this film before. He took out his phone and called Detective Morrison. Detective? This is Marcus Chen. I'm outside the 5th Street coffee shop. Sarah Porter is currently meeting with David Reston. I thought you should know, given the trial next month and the restraining order he's supposedly under. Morrison's voice sharpened. Is she meeting him voluntarily? Yes. She lied about where she was going tonight. His voice cracked. This is the second time they've met this week. I have location data for Tuesday too. Mr. Chen, this could affect the case. If she's in contact with the defendant, the prosecutor might consider her a hostile witness or worse. Does she know you're there? No. I'm leaving now. I needed someone to know. I needed proof that I'm not crazy, that I'm not paranoid, that I'm not the villain in this story. You're not, Morrison said gently. I'm sorry, Mr. Chen. For what it's worth, I thought she'd learned. So did I. Marcus ended the call and started his car. He drove to his brother's house across town, the same place he'd stayed 8 weeks ago during the first betrayal. His brother, Tom, took one look at his face and pulled him inside. She did it again, Marcus said flatly. She's with him right now. Tom's wife, Elena, emerged from the kitchen, her expression shifting from confusion to fury in seconds. That's stupid, selfish. Does she have a death wish for her own life? I gave her everything, Marcus said, collapsing onto their couch. I forgave her. I went to therapy. I learned to trust her again. And she just threw it all away for the same guy who stole from me, who lied to both of us, who's facing fraud charges. What are you going to do? Tom asked. Marcus pulled out his phone, opening the Notes app where he'd been drafting a message all day, hoping he'd never need to send it. I'm going to do what I should have done 8 weeks ago. I'm going to walk away and never look back. He typed, I know where you are. I know who you're with. Don't come home. Your belongings will be boxed and at Tom's house by Sunday. My lawyer will send divorce papers. I'm done. Sarah. I'm finally done. He hit send. Sarah felt her phone buzz in her purse but ignored it. David was in the middle of explaining his plan. Tickets to Singapore, false documents, a story they could tell about being newlyweds starting over after a business failure. It was insane. It was desperate. It was impossible. And yet, she hadn't said no. She hadn't walked away. She was sitting here, listening, letting him hold her hand, feeling the familiar pull of his charisma like gravity. I need an answer tonight, David pressed. The flight leaves Monday morning. After that, it's too late. Sarah's phone buzzed again, then again. She pulled it out, annoyed, ready to silence it. Then she saw Marcus's name. She read the message once, twice, 3 times, each word landing like a physical blow. No, she whispered. No, no, no. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Other patrons looked over at the commotion. Sarah? David asked, concern and calculation mixing in his expression. He knows. Marcus knows I'm here. Oh God, he's done. He's actually done this time. She ran for the door, her breath coming in panicked gasps. Behind her, David called her name, but she didn't stop. She drove home going 20 miles over the speed limit, running 2 red lights, praying she'd get there before Marcus did something irrevocable. The apartment was empty when she arrived. Marcus's closet was open, several suits missing. His toiletries were gone from the bathroom. On the kitchen table sat his key to the apartment, and beside it, a single piece of paper. Sarah picked it up with trembling hands. It was a printed transcript of her location data from the past week, showing her at the coffee shop Tuesday evening and tonight. Below it, Marcus had written in his careful handwriting, I begged you to be honest. I gave you every opportunity to tell the truth. You chose lies again. You chose him again. I can't keep choosing you when you won't choose me. I hope whatever you think you're getting from him is worth everything you've lost. I hope you figure out why you sabotage good things before you destroy someone else's life. Most of all, I hope you learn that some doors, once closed, never open again. Sarah collapsed onto the kitchen floor, sobbing. She called Marcus's phone, disconnected. She called Tom. He answered only to tell her Marcus never wanted to speak to her again and hung up. She called Elena, who unleashed a blistering assessment of Sarah's character before blocking her number. She'd really done it this time. There was no coming back from this. The next 6 months were brutal. David fled to Singapore without her, violating his bail and ensuring he'd never be able to return to the country. The prosecutor, furious at Sarah's contact with the defendant, withdrew her immunity offer and subpoenaed her as a potentially hostile witness. Marcus's divorce filing included a detailed account of both betrayals, the affair, the theft, and the continued contact with David. Sarah's lawyer advised her to settle quickly because fighting would only make everything public record. She signed away any claim to Marcus's assets, keeping only her own mounting debt, legal fees, credit card bills from her affair with David, rent on the studio apartment she could barely afford. Her company, embarrassed by the scandal and the police investigation, let her go during a restructuring. Her parents, when they learned the full story, stopped taking her calls. Jennifer and her other friends had all chosen Marcus's side, unsurprisingly, since Sarah had lied to them repeatedly and destroyed a relationship they'd all supported. She was alone. Truly, completely alone in a way she'd never experienced before.